Really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Of course. So you work a lot in dealing with people with chronic and terminal illness, correct?
Specifically cancer, yes.
Can you tell us a bit about what got you into that, how you got started?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So basically, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma myself in 2011. And my experience, what I learned from my experience was that there is a huge gap between the medical and the emotional sides of cancer. And by that, I mean, there just isn't, at the time specifically, there were not a lot of people to talk to who had been through something similar. And then also the learning curve. I was not someone who was sick prior to being diagnosed with cancer. I never broken a bone. I never stayed the night in the hospital. So, other than my annual exams, I was a new healthcare consumer in a sense because I had to be in that system more now. So, of course, there's a huge learning curve, learning, what kind of doctors are needed when, what kind of doctors do what, how does all of my health insurance work, what do I need to ask my oncologist, just so many different things that I needed to learn. But then also, because the healthcare system is so crunched, and it really is now, um, even though I had a great oncologist, things were missing like nutrition, being connected with the right kind of therapist or social worker, getting more information about financial challenges and things like that. So, just having all of those resources in one place was missing. And so, I wanted to take what I had been through and help other people and make it a lot easier for them when they get that diagnosis so that they're not so overwhelmed.
That's very inspiring. Very
Thank you.
inspiring. Let's talk a bit about your life before your diagnosis, your childhood, how you grew up.
Sure. So, childhood, at times it was really good, and at times it was kind of tough. I'm a very observant person, I always have been. And so growing up, I would notice that there were certain things with family that I'm like, that's weird, or gosh, I don't want to do that when I get older. And so it was just a lot of things that I had learned. I had a great relationship with my mom, my grandmother. In the summers, I would travel a lot to Louisiana, a small town there called Ponchatoula. So really learned a lot from my mom and my grandmother. With my dad, it was good when I was younger, but as I started to really understand some of the things that were going on, that really changed. And so, some of the behaviors, just the way that he talked to my mom and me, that really started to shift the dynamic in our relationship. So, fast forward to adulthood. Before my cancer diagnosis, I was in a very stressful but high paying career as a supply chain analyst, and was starting to get to the point where it just wasn't satisfying anymore. I knew that I wanted to be doing something different. However, the pay and then also the fear of I don't know what's next. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. All of those things played a factor, but the stress and just trying to climb the corporate ladder in a sense just wasn't for someone like me. Like I'm not a very, and I'm not saying all people are like this in corporate America, but in the systems that I was in, it was kind of cutthroat and things like that. And I'm like, I don't want to do that if to get to where to get to the top, I guess, so to speak. And so all of those things were really wearing on me. And honestly, Kendall, I think that that stress was a contributing factor to ultimately my cancer diagnosis.
Now, speaking of stress, were you able to learn, obviously, as you're going on your journey and you're helping other people, what impact stress ultimately plays on our overall wellness? Obviously, it has a major impact on mental health, but in regards to how it contributes to ultimately a diagnosis like what you had and so many other people get to? What is the implication of that?
Stress is huge. It's really huge, and it impacts so many areas of your life. It impacts your sleep. It definitely impacts your mental health. It impacts your immune system and its ability to fight off, say, bad cancer cells or a cold and things like that. So it really taxes your immune system. And of course, stress, a lot of people get anxiety, depression, things like that. It can cause people, if they have like addictive behaviors, it can cause people, for example, who gamble to gamble more. It can cause people who drink to drink more. And so for people that don't have that outlet or don't know how to work through that stress, it can be devastating. And on top of that, you mentioned childhood. Another thing that impacts cancer and other illnesses like that is trauma. When you're growing up and you experience this devastating trauma in your life as a child, especially, if you carry that with you, and most of us do because we're not taught how to release those trauma bonds, we carry that with us. That's in our system. That's in our body. That's in our energy. And so all of that ultimately, based on what I've learned, can be a factor in someone getting sick as well.
You speak about trauma, and I actually, that seems to be a resounding kind of consensus when you talk to people in the medical and the professional mental health community, that trauma is actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest, risk factor for disease. Is there something that a person could do besides maybe going to therapy, or maybe that's the only option, to determine if they have trauma, which I think every person probably has a little bit, but then also to deal with that before it gets to a point where it's physically and mentally affecting you?
That's a great question, Kendall. What I've learned, and I'm still learning as I interview people myself, there are hypnotherapists that a lot of people might hear that word and they're like, "That's woo woo, that's weird." But no, there's really there's a gentleman by the name of Matthew Brownstein, and he has a like a hypnotherapist academy, and so that's one way. He actually walks with his clients or the people that come to see him, and he helps them to release that trauma. Um, Another way is energy healers. There are people out there who can help you spot that trauma and figure out actually where you're holding that trauma in your body and help you release that. For some people, it may work in 1 or 2 sessions. For some people, it may take longer. And I think that really depends on the severity of the trauma, but then also the person themselves and how hard or how tight they're holding on to that trauma. And so those are two different resources I know for sure that can be very helpful for people are hypnotherapists and then again energy healers.
Now, we live in a society that's very much predicated on this idea of hustle culture and stress and everything that comes with trying to get to the top. Like you said, climbing the corporate ladder is almost normalized and expected, especially out of young people. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, being somebody who was in a place like that and has seen the negative effects of it.
I love that question, Kendall, because it is something that I've recently readdressed. So I addressed it, of course, when I received my diagnosis, because, of course, when you get that kind of diagnosis, you really start to evaluate your life, or at least that's what I did. And I determined what needed to go, whether it's people, whether it's had the fear of saying no, just trying to carry all these different things. So fast forward to just this fall, winter. I had noticed that I had fallen back into this pattern where I'm like, go, go, go. I got to do this. I got to do that. And I was getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, which I'm an 8 hour a night type of person. I really need that kind of sleep to feel good. And I know everyone's different. But I started to just feel sluggish and I actually felt myself feeling like depressed. And by nature, I'm not really a depressed person. I mean, everyone gets depressed from time to time, but that's not something I've been suffering from or diagnosed with. So I had started reading this book, and it's called Rest is Resistance. And it talks exactly about that grind culture mentality, how it's tied to capitalism, and even racism and things like that. It's written by a woman. Her name is Trisha Hersey, and it's called Rest is Resistance. And I'm going to tell you, Kendall, when I read that book, it's an easy read. It's like maybe no more than 200 pages. And she breaks down how we've gotten trapped into this cycle from feeling like you said, using that word grind and making it sound like we're doing just all these wonderful things because we're grinding and driving ourselves into the ground. But we're really hurting ourselves. And it's capitalism that's fueling this. And she breaks down how important it is to just stop, to take that rest, take those naps, and stop driving yourself into the ground because ultimately it's going to cost you. And the hard work that you have done, if you get really sick, you're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to take care of yourself. And so I think this grind culture really needs to go. Again, I had to catch myself again because I had gotten caught up in it. And I think that we're taught by society if we're always going, we're just accomplishing all these things. But if we rest, if we just take a break, we're considered lazy or we're not doing enough. And that's simply not true because we all have to rest and restore to be our best.
Now, I come from a competitive sports background, but I think when you grow up in an atmosphere, especially with sports, um, there's almost this mentality that, again, if you're not doing enough, then you're not going to succeed. And there's a stigma in sports that if you not necessarily give up, but if you take a break, you're weak and you should be absolutely exhausted every single day. And I think as women, especially with hormones and all these other things that kind of make us a little bit different than men, there is starting to be a conversation around rest and how important it is. But I think that it can still be better. It can still be better for sure.
Yeah. But in life, I can really relate to that statement because I'll tie it to, I'll go back to my childhood and tie it to that. Not wanting to be what I saw, some of the things that I saw growing up. I really pushed myself to get into college, to do all these things, to work hard and try to avoid the lifestyles that I seen. And so putting that pressure on myself, but then also, going into college, that's very competitive. In the corporate system, as I mentioned, that's very competitive. So there's all these things, that say you have to be doing something all the time. And specifically in corporate America, it's like if you're the first one in and you're the last one out, you're the champion. But if you come in and you do your 8 to 9 hours and you say, "Hey, I have a family," or "Hey, I have hobbies or things I want to attend to," you're looked at as an employee who's not a team player, and that's simply unfair.
I think there's also that kind of notion, and I'm in this stage in my life as well. I'm sure you've experienced it where when you're a little bit younger, say early 20s, mid 20s, you have this idea that you're invincible and nothing can touch you. And that's potentially why we continue to throw ourselves into more than we can actually handle because we don't think that there's anything that could possibly hurt us. And we are most people in the prime of their life, so to speak, with their health. But what impact does having that perception of life ultimately have on a person down the road?
I think that that is a bad thought process or perception to have because people are getting diagnosed with cancer younger and younger. people are getting diagnosed with other diseases younger and younger. So if you take care of yourself in your 20s, in your 30s, you just have a better chance of a good outcome later on when you do get older, say in your 40s and 50s. So I always like to encourage people, just because you're a teenager, you're in your 20s, it doesn't mean you're invincible. Number one, people get very sick at those young ages. Number two, the earlier you start to really honor and take care of your health, that's just going to help you down the road when you get older and you're more susceptible to different kind of diseases, ailments, arthritis, all of those things. And to that note, I think that because of the health that the good health that I was in when I was diagnosed with cancer and then I had to ultimately have treatment, if I had not been in the type of health that I was in, I probably would not have made it through the way that I did. The doctors say I sailed through it. It didn't feel like that to me, but from what they saw, I guess I made it look easy, but it's very important to get rid of that mindset and get your rest. I know in your 20s, some people they want to party and do all these things, but do that in moderation. I'm not a drinker. I know people drink. I don't smoke, all those things, and people can do what they want to do. But I just encourage people that you are invincible and you should take care of your body at all times. If you want to party, have fun, drink, whatever it is, just do it in moderation.
I like that. I think that's a very relatable thing, especially as I'm in my 20s. Obviously, I went through that phase where I that typical college stage where you're not getting any sleep, you're waking up at 8 a.m. to go to a class, and then you're staying up all weekend, basically doing whatever. Um, and again, it's just ultimately you will see the effects of that, of course.
That's so true. And, not just health wise, but also in your appearance. Some people in their 20s, I've seen they look much older. That can also, you mentioned hormones, that also can impact your hormones. When people are not getting enough sleep or they're drinking too much, they gain weight. Their face looks puffy. Some people start to lose their hair. So all of those things are interconnected. And I just want to encourage people, if you're noticing those kind of changes, like your skin, you're breaking out more, you're losing hair, your body is telling you something. So listen to your body and figure out what's going on. And so I think that's very important also, is to, as early as possible in your life, really start to get in tune with your body. Be still, pay attention to what it's telling you.
So you were diagnosed in 2011. How old would you have been when you received that diagnosis?
Yes, I was 35 at that time, so I'm 48 right now. And again, I was in, that's a time in my life where I thought I would be getting married, having children, and things like that. And cancer showed up and said, "That's not gonna happen right now." And I really just had to put all that on pause and really figure out what was important to me at that time. But then also, again, what did I need to remove from my life? And just kind of take back control of my life. What things did I want to do that would make me happy? That's how I discovered my purpose as well. And I hate to sound cliche-ish, but really, cancer is what gave me the life that I have now. And it forced me to just really evaluate a lot of things. And, running on 4 hours of sleep, working all these hours, making decent money, those things were not serving me. And so I feel like now I have my health back plus my purpose, and I'm just overall happier.
That literally gave me goosebumps because I think when we talk about life, and it goes back to that young mindset of thinking that nothing bad can happen, a lot of the times we don't understand necessarily the implications of the fact that we do only get one life and that every moment that we do get here is so important. And that's something I recently actually had to go through. I left a job that was severely affecting me mentally. And the amount, obviously, the money was great, and that's a great thing. And being able to financially be a little bit more successful. But at the end of the day, mentally, the difference I feel is just, it's astronomical.
Yeah. I want to applaud you, first of all, for taking that step and saying, hey, my health, my mental health is more important. The other thing that I would like to point out is that, yeah, you may have all this money, you may be making great money, but if you're not in a position where you're healthy enough to enjoy it, what is the point? And so that's something that I always tell people as well is like, yep, you can have these nice cars, you can strive to have all these materialistic things, but just think if you can't get out of bed, what good are they? You know, if you're not able to physically take care of yourself, what purpose does those things serve? And so I always like to encourage people to focus on your physical and mental health first. And whatever is impeding on that, you need to reevaluate it and figure out, hey, how can I get rid of it or how can I lessen the effects of whatever that thing is?
Mm-hmm. Health, as you get older, health is wealth, and that's what you start to realize
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Let's talk a bit about when you got diagnosed and maybe the weeks to months leading up to that. What changes specifically did you notice in your body, in your mental health, that kind of prompted you to reach out and seek professional medical help?
So actually, my cancer journey started a year before and in 2010. And so 2010, I went to have my annual physical exam. I pointed out to my doctor that there was a lump on the left side of my neck. I was working out a lot, so she didn't even look at it or anything. She just kind of blew it off as well. It's probably just a pulled muscle. And so, again, Kendall, me being in corporate America, me being that striver, and then also me focusing on everyone else's needs and problems, I put it on the back burner. But a year later, I said to my mom, I said, Mom, I still have this lump on my neck. I'm very concerned. She said, why don't you go to a different doctor? So I went to a different doctor who happened to be a Somalian lady. And at the end of my exam, I told her that there was a lump on the side of my neck. I was very concerned about it. So it started with the lump. And so her response was totally different. She looked at it, she touched it, and I could tell that when she touched it, her face changed. And I knew something was wrong too, but I never thought it was cancer. And so she said, I need for you to go in right away and get an ultrasound. I'm going to set that up for you. So a couple days later, I went in to get an ultrasound that came back inconclusive. But I could tell by the technician's face that something was wrong. So the next step, because that was inconclusive, the next step was to have a fine needle aspiration. That is where they take a small, they use a very small needle. And they go into that area and they take some cells and tissue from that area, that lymph node is what where they took it from. That came back inconclusive because they didn't have a big enough sample size. So finally, they say, Talaya, we're going to have to do a larger biopsy of that lymph node. So after that, that's when I got the call on my way home from work. Now, to answer your main question about what symptoms, initially I didn't have any symptoms other than the lump on the side of my neck. But what I can tell you was when I started the process of staging, meaning doing all these tests to figure out what kind of cancer it was and how far along it was, I did start to have night sweats. And I was, now when I look back, I was tired more often than not. But again, I attribute it to that grind, go, 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 strive mindset. But those are the things that I was starting to notice. Initially the lump, but then throughout staging the night sweats and fatigue.
I think it's interesting that you bring up that your first doctor kind of overlooked your concerns for the lump on your neck. And I find, especially in modern medicine, especially with younger people, you were considered to be quite young still when all this happened, is that doctors, whether they're overworked or not, sometimes it's a matter of advocating for yourself to get the kind of stuff that you think that you need. Do you think, what would be your advice to a younger person that is in a similar situation, that is maybe concerned about their health but isn't necessarily able to get the type of attention that they feel like they need?
Yes, Kendall. I want to start out by saying that that is why another reason why I do the work that I do today. And that experience also forced me, in a sense, or encouraged me, in a sense, to be my own best advocate. So, what I like to tell people, no matter your age, but especially when you're younger, and people say, oh, that diagnosis is for people 60 and up. That's not true. If you feel like you're not getting your questions and concerns addressed and answered, go somewhere else and keep going to different doctors until you get the answers that you need and that you want. And if you're not satisfied, if you feel like you want to try to work with this doctor and say, "Hey, I need for you to look into this a little bit further," go ahead. But keep pushing the issue until you find out what's going on.
Let's talk about a little bit, obviously, after you got diagnosed, what did your life look like in the moments and the months right after that? Was it kind of, some people I talked to say that it went very quickly and things progressed very quickly. What was the situation for you?
It was like things went very quickly, because like I said, you get that diagnosis, you get connected with an oncologist, you start to do all these tests to get staged. And then for me, I got my port put in and then I started treatment. So I was diagnosed April 8th of 2011, and I actually started treatment probably a month later, beginning of May. I think it was like May 5th. So that shows you how quickly that goes. Now, not only does it go quickly, but you're just flooded with information. You're just flooded with all these different things. But for me, Kendall, it felt like I was watching this. I was outside of my body watching this and watching myself go through this. And it was really interesting to experience that because it's like, wow, like I said, I knew something was wrong. I didn't expect it to be cancer because of my age, because of what we are shown on TV of what a person with cancer looks like. They're bald, they're frail, they're pushing an IV stand down the hallway trying to get exercise. And that's just not reality for a lot of people. And so it went quickly. It was overwhelming. But because I'm a very analytical person, I was able to take all that information and figure out how to make it work for me. Now, also, again, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't a consistent healthcare consumer. So I needed to really learn how to talk to my oncologist. I needed to learn what questions I needed to ask, to make sure that I got the care that I wanted. And not only that, but to make sure that my healthcare team understood the quality of life that I wanted after this. By that, I mean, what are all my treatment options? What are the best options that are going to help me get that outcome and quality of life that I want when this treatment's over? I know that I'm going to, have some after effects or side effects from this treatment, but how severe are they going to be? Are they going to prevent me from being able to continue to work out and things like that? So just knowing those questions to ask, but then also trying to have the forethought of what do I want my life to look like after? And making sure that whatever decisions I made, because they're my decisions, they're your decisions. The doctor is just sharing information with you. You don't have to do what they say. And I'm not telling people to rebel, but I'm telling people to think about what you want because ultimately that decision is yours. And so life was just full of constant changes. It was full of uncertainty. And it went fast. But some things that really helped me were journaling, were meditation, were walking, and things like that. Because when you're going through something like that, and let's be honest, you're facing death, it's a lot. And so you have to figure out how to get yourself in a space where you don't go into that dark place because you need to be, if possible, operating from your best mental health as possible. When you're depressed and stressed all the time, that impacts your immune system. This is a time when you need your immune system to be at its best. And so there's just so many different factors that go into it. And something like cancer, it impacts every area of your life. And so I just want to encourage people, whether it's you, a loved one going through cancer, just keep in mind that it's a long road and it's a tough road, but I'm not saying you have to be positive all the time. But when those, feelings arise, depression, anxiety, visit with them, sit with them, but don't spend a whole lot of time with them. Don't let that consume you.
I think that translates over to a lot of aspects of our life and not just when you're dealing with a health concern. Obviously, that's when you kind of would experience those emotions the most. But when you're consistently negative, and there's tons of scientific studies to kind of correlate that, when you're always negative and your mind, it takes so much more energy too to be in a state of negativity and constantly looking at things in the sense of how bad they are and everything like that. And obviously in a situation like you were in where you are facing death, that's about as bad as it can get. And I can understand how hard, actually I can't understand how hard it would be to be in a position like that. How would you encourage somebody to remain positive? What kinds of things should you be telling yourself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to encourage people to not do it alone. There's so many people out there now that are willing to help. Myself, there's other types of coaches and things like that, but find someone that you can trust and lean on them. That's number one. Don't do it alone. Number two, if you are a very positive person naturally, and you are feeling depressed or anxious or whatever, don't try to pretend to be positive. As I just mentioned, sit with that feeling, but don't stay with it. So feel the feelings, work through those emotions. And the other thing is, if you're negative all the time, if you're depressed all the time, talk with someone, talk with a therapist early and often. Don't wait. And I actually encourage people when you get that diagnosis, seek out a therapist or a counselor right away because you don't know what that thing is going to look like down the road. And so the earlier you can get that support, the better. The other thing I like to encourage people to do is seek out complementary care or therapies. That could be yoga, that could be Tai Chi, that could be meditation, that could be journaling. There's so many things. So that complementary care, it doesn't replace your standard care. It is something to help ease the side effects of treatment, but then also to help you release that depression, anxiety, frustration. So find other outlets. And then also be realistic about your limitations. You're going to be more tired. So don't feel bad if you can't get through that 10-page to-do list. You should not worry about that. So give yourself grace and surround yourself with people that are positive. Laugh. You know, comedy was a big thing for me. I would just sit and, and watch comedy movies and just laugh. We all know that laughter releases those good endorphins, and that was something I did too. Another thing is I'm not an artist, but I love art. So adult coloring books were another way where I kind of release my mind. So again, don't do it alone. If you have the means, find a therapist early, as soon as you can. Don't wait till after. A lot of people do that. The other thing is find an outlet, find some complementary therapies that can help support you along the way and ease those side effects. And, revert to things that you love that make you happy. If it's art, if it's, watching funny movies, whatever that is. If it's within your ability to do that and it's not hindering your health, focus on those things that make you happy.
And you talk about how you had this sort of this plan for your life before you got diagnosed, and how you obviously had to rethink those plans and adjust your life accordingly after your diagnosis. How does your life look now compared to what you thought it would look in your 20s? And how can a person who is also experiencing that massive change from what they'd always envisioned their life to be, how can they deal with that in a way that is both encouraging and healthy?
So, if it's okay, I want to answer your second question first, how to deal with that. I want to encourage people to go with the flow. It's an opportunity to explore and learn, because how do you know what you really want if you're not experiencing things? How do you know? How do you know what's out there? So take the time, give yourself grace again, and don't feel like, hey, I have to have my life figured out in a year. There's people my age and even older who are still figuring that out. And so I just want to encourage people to get out there, to learn, try new things. That'll help you get closer to figuring out what that is going to look like for you now compared to what my life looked like, when I received my cancer diagnosis. It's calmer. I'm not stressed 90% of the time. Um, of course, I'm not where I was financially. I mean, by making the money I was making, I'm more focused now on helping other people, which is true to who I am. I'm a helper by nature. And so now I'm just really focused on making those heartfelt connections, growing my business, talking to different kinds of people like you, forming those meaningful partnerships and traveling, as much as I can. And still, I'm on a learning journey. Still, I'm a lifelong learner. So that is what my life looks like now.
I think uncertainty is a really big thing that a lot of young people deal with. I think everybody deals with uncertainty and this level of being scared of what's coming next. And obviously you were in a position where that may or may not have been your biggest fear. Obviously facing death is incredibly scary. But I think when it comes to uncertainty, what did going through cancer and coming out on the other side of it ultimately do to affect your perception of uncertainty?
Uncertainty is something that we can't control. But for me and the type of person I am, asking questions, getting as much information as I can from professionals, so to speak, but then also doing the research and looking within for myself, those things really helped me with uncertainty. And that's what I want to encourage people to do is not be afraid to ask questions. Get as much information as you can because studies have proven that, for example, when someone's diagnosed with cancer, the more information that is shared with them about their diagnosis, about their treatment options, and about the potential effects of those treatment options, that helps people to be better informed and make more confident decisions. So, getting and gathering as much information as you can. If you are getting information that you're not sure about or it doesn't make sense, ask questions until you understand what that information means and how it will impact you in your life. And so that's what I want to encourage people to do is to again explore, ask those questions, seek out people who may have, been through something similar, whatever it is, whatever's driving that uncertainty. Of course, none of us know what's down the road for us or what our life is going to look like in 5 to 10 years. But I think that taking care of your physical and mental health in the present is just going to help you down the road, whatever your life is going to look like later.
I love that. I think we often, and again, back to hustle culture, we get so lost in this idea of trying to achieve more and more and more. And that was something I personally really struggled with is, okay, when I get this promotion or when I get this new job, I'm going to be happy. And then you get there and it's like, okay, well, now I need to do this. And there's never, if you keep doing life that way, you never truly reach this thing that's going to make you happy. And so I think a lot of people can really benefit from the idea of just being present because that's all that we're truly given at any given time.
I could not agree more, Kendall. And that was something that I learned is to be present. But then I want to go back to what you just said about how you would accomplish a goal, you would get that promotion, and you're like, I got to get more. I got to keep going. Another thing that I learned was to celebrate my accomplishments, to celebrate myself. Back when I was going through treatment, getting up and exercising, that was a celebration. I had accomplished something. So learning to really value those things that we consider small everyday things that we take for granted, learning to celebrate those things, I think will really help out a lot with that as well. But not always feeling like we're running this race against other people. It's not a race. It's about what steps can I take to have the quality of life that I want? What do I need to do to get that peace of mind? What do I need to do to be happy? What does success look like for me personally? Defining those things for yourself. And I think it's really important, especially with today and social media and things like that. I just wish that so many people wouldn't turn to social media looking for what success is or what success is supposed to be or what beauty is. That's all inside of you. And you get to define that for yourself. Instagram, Facebook, they don't get to tell you anything. I mean, so that's another thing that is really a huge, gosh, a huge burden on people's mental health right now. And I'm saying this because I'm in a social media sabbatical right now myself, which started January 14th and it's going to go through the end of this month. And I was actually on social media, of course, to promote my business. But then you see all these other things. You see all these business owners who are doing these things and they're posting, I got 10 million followers or whatever. And that you look at that and you're like, well, wow, what am I doing wrong? Or well, I'm not buying for clicks and likes. I'm not doing advertisements and all those things. And so sometimes you have to kind of regroup and reposition yourself and say, what is the purpose of me using these platforms? What is it that I really want to accomplish? And so I just want to tell people when you go on social media, it's entertainment. A lot of times it's not reality, and they don't define who you are and what success is to you and what beauty is to you. That's for you to define. And so I think that's really important for younger people to take that in today and realize that what you see is not what it really is. So
For sure. How has your mental health been affected since you started to do this sabbatical? I know it hasn't been that long, but what changes
yeah,
have you noticed?
I'm more creative. I have more time to think about, okay, when I get back on social media, what is it that I really want to share? What kind of impact do I want to have? And so it really got me out of that mindset like I'm not doing enough,
Right.
as to when I do get back on there, it will be very limited, um, but it will be a purpose behind it. So I may get on there to share a statistic that I learned about cancer, or I may get on there to share a podcast episode, whatever. It will be very, very, very intentional, which it was when I started. But then I shifted from that. And so, hence the sabbatical. I needed to regroup. I noticed that things were starting to get into my mind that shouldn't have been there and weren't there before, because again, it's my journey. It's my business. It's my success, and I get to define that. So,
I love that. I think a lot of people are starting to experiment with either completely getting off of social media. I know a ton of people who've deleted Facebook, which I mean, I should probably do that at some point because it's just very toxic. And it can be obviously if you're using it for no specific point or purpose, like what you mentioned before. So I think that's a great point to make is that we are not comparison is the thief of joy. And if we spend our entire lives comparing, then we're never really going to be happy.
yeah. And Kendall, unfortunately, Facebook, social media, that is the new peer pressure for younger people, especially teenagers. In my time, it was other kids at school. We didn't have cell phones and social media and all these things. And I'm finding that it is maturing younger people much faster. And by that I mean it's taking away a lot of their innocence. They're seeing all these things on there that they shouldn't be seeing. There's all these weird challenges and things like that that are happening on social media. But then also let's look at the beauty and quote unquote fashion side of it. There's these girls that are 13, 14 with full faces of makeup on. And that's telling them that they have to do that to be beautiful. And it's like, no, your skin, the way that you look, barefaced and without extra hair and all that, you are beautiful the way that you were created. And I think educating young girls and young women that, hey, makeup is just to enhance your beauty. It doesn't make you beautiful. And I think that there needs to be more discussion and definition around those things.
100% agree with you. 100%. What advice would you give to a younger person who has their entire life ahead of them, so to speak?
That's the key. You have your entire life. Just because this big roadblock, this big thing that appears in your life that looks like a monster shows up and throws a monkey wrench into your plans, realize that that doesn't mean your life is over. That means it might be redirecting your life to something better and getting you on the path where you're supposed to be. But don't look at it as this thing that is taking away your life. Figure out, what can I learn from this situation? Number one. Number two, what things do you need to have in place to help you mentally work through this thing in front of you, whatever that is? I really don't want to use the word mental toughness, because we all have times where we have to release, let go.
Right.
So I want to tell people, don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to lean on people, and make sure you have at least one person in your life that you can rely on and talk to, who's going to encourage you on those days where you're empty. Um, but don't look at it as like your life is over. A lot of times there's something to be gained from whatever that is that shows up. So just face it head on. And if you're a spiritual person, rely on that. Rely on your intuition as well. What is your gut telling you about this thing? And don't be afraid to walk your own path. Don't be afraid of that. Because a lot of times that is the point of some of the things that we go through is kind of to redirect us and get us on the path that God or whoever you is believe in. That's the path that they want you to be on. So don't feel like your life is over. It's a moment in time.
Is that the same advice that you would give to your younger self? If you
I
could go back
would.
and speak to her.
Yes, that. And there's a quote by Lena Horne that I really love, and it says something to the effect of, "It's not the load that breaks you down; it's the way you carry it." So the way that you approach these tough things is what's going to help you get past it. If you carry that in a way where it's breaking your back, then it may not look so good for you after. But it's the way that you carry those things. It's the way that you work through those things that's gonna make all the difference.
Amazing. I love that. That's a great quote.
Thank you.
Now, where can people find you? Socials, obviously you have a website.
Sure. So they can find me at on the other side dot life. Again, there's life after these tough things. So on the other side dot life, that is my website. I do have a podcast called Navigating Cancer Together. And of course, that's on all the major platforms. And then also, when I am on social media, I have an Instagram page that is called On the Other Side Cancer Doula. And, also, Facebook, same thing. So, but all of that information is on my website, and, if you would like to connect or you have questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I think what you have to say and the experiences that you've been through can really impact a lot of people. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And I think a lot of other people will be too.
Thank you, Kendall, so much for having me and for allowing me to share my story, and thank you again for sharing your platform with me. I appreciate it.